Alright kids, who's ready for a double dose of childhood trauma?
Witches. They're real, and they hate children.
Welcome.
The Witches is directed by Robert Zemeckis and is the newest adaptation of the children's book by Roald Dahl. You know, the dude who wrote stuff like Where the Sidewalk Ends and traumatized you repeatedly as a child. It stars Josiah Bruno, Octavia Spencer, and Anne Hathaway, and it tells the story of a young boy and his grandma in 1960s Alabama who go to a hotel and unintentionally end up running across a coven of witches, led by the Grand High Witch herself, Anne Hathaway. Now, for those of you who don't know, The Witches is a classic, if not horrific, children's book by Roald Dahl, and it's one that received a film adaptation already in 1990 by Nicholas Roeg. And there's probably a good number of you watching this channel who saw that movie as a child and saw Angelica Houston as the Grand High Witch and were traumatized for life. Because Roeg's take on The Witch is one that is definitely one that's too intense for some children to handle, and that's not only because of its incredible use of practical effects, but also because Roald Dahl fucking hated kids and wrote horrifying stories intended for kids to read and then go, oh god, I'm having an existential crisis at 3 years old. It's a horror classic that I know a lot of people were traumatized by as kids, and I admittedly saw it a little too late in my life to be frightened by it, but I do appreciate it as a really cool, cute, introductory horror film for children. But we're not here to talk about the 90s movie, we're here to talk about the HBO Max version directed by Robert Zemeckis, for which I got a free trial to watch this movie and then immediately deleted. And while I want to keep comparisons of the two films to a minimum because they are ultimately different visions of the same book, some comparisons are bound to occur. I will try my best to keep them to a minimum. Where Zemeckis' film works really well is in its tone, and in the fact that it takes on a much more whimsical, fantastical adventure feel. It's still a horror film for kids, full of weird and unsettling imagery, but there's definitely a sense of whimsy and magic and fun to the whole thing. Its decision to use a lot more CGI than practical effects is one that leans heavily into its more fantastical elements. The witches themselves are far more monstrous in this version, replacing the idea of just ugly women with magic with genuinely horrifying, uncanny valley monsters with really wide mouths full of sharp teeth and giant eyes. It's a decision that works well in that it doesn't look real, but it looks good and it looks just weird enough to elicit unsettled feelings even in adults like me. Guillermo del Toro was a producer on this movie, and you can absolutely see his influence in the design of the witches themselves, especially when Anne Hathaway's arms start extending unnaturally and jerkily in this really awkward, unnerving way that only could come from somebody like his imagination. And on that note, let's talk about Anne Hathaway as the Grand High Witch. Angelica Houston's performance is iconic. The practical effects on her appearance make her an absolute nightmare to look at, especially for kids who have never seen that kind of stuff before. Hathaway's performance is different. There's a lot less prosthetic on her, and thus she's able to be a lot more physical with her role, and that physicality not only lends to the more monstrous elements of the character, but it also lets her comedic chops come through in a way that is a lot of fun. It's clear she's having the time of her life with this role. She is chewing all the scenery with her giant mouth, and it's hilarious and awesome, and I loved it. Like, I challenge you not to find her delightful in this role. Honestly, I would say the movie is worth watching simply for Anne Hathaway.
You see, girls? He would exterminate those brats.
Rats.
Honestly, most of the performances in this movie are good. It's a star-studded cast, from Octavia Spencer to Stanley Tucci to Kristen Chenoweth to Chris Rock. We'll get back to those two later. Octavia Spencer is honestly just wonderful in everything I've ever seen her in. She has such a warmth and energy to her, and Grandma in this movie is no exception to that. She's this wise, nurturing old woman, but she's got an attitude and also a very deep knowledge of magic, and it's awesome. I want her to be my grandma. But keep in mind, this movie's not perfect, and there's a bit about this movie that I didn't love. The over-reliance on CGI did get bothersome, especially when it was being used for things that it was not needed for. There is nothing that Hades the cat does... Speak of the devil. I didn't plan that, that just happened. There's nothing that Hades the cat does in this movie that requires him to be CGI, and I don't really understand that. Like, you don't need to make a cat CGI for your movie just because everything else is CGI. On top of that, some of the voice acting choices are just odd. Chris Rock plays an older version of the boy, and it doesn't fit. Like, not only does his narration feel like it's in a a totally different movie. Chris Rock doesn't even feel like he would be the same character as the boy, so it's just bizarre to me. The same goes for Kristen Chenoweth, who, like, her performance is fine, but I don't really understand why it was necessary to add her into the movie at all. Like, not only does her voice not really feel like it matches with a mouse, but also, her inclusion just bothered me. There was literally no reason for her outside of giving him, like, another friend, because they needed a girl in the group. There's also some changes that were made that were just odd to me. Like, again, comparing it to the 90s film, the opening story that Grandma tells in the 90s movie about Erica getting trapped in the painting, that shit is horrifying. That is existentially nightmarish. So I was a little disappointed to see that they changed it to, like, have Grandma's friend Alice turn into a chicken, which, like, yeah, I guess that sucks, but, like, I don't know, there's nothing more disturbing to me in a movie like this than that opening scene of the original. But also I gotta acknowledge, like, I'm not the audience for this movie. I'm not. This is a kid's movie first and foremost. I saw the original Witches far too late in my life to have any real attachment to it or any nostalgia based on it, and neither this film nor the original left me with any feelings outside of, oh, that's cute. But I appreciate them for what they are, which are family, fun horror movies, and I'm gonna say that The Witches is good for fans of family horror films. It's whimsical and fun and bright, and the lavish colors certainly give it away as something aimed at younger audiences. But as a fun family horror comedy, I think it's got a little bit of something for everybody. And, like, seriously, y'all, it's worth watching just for Anne Hathaway. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and you want to see more, click down there, like, comment, subscribe. There's a Patreon link down in the description if you want to donate, help us grow, make new, better quality content. You could be like all these cool people right here and join my 31 Nights of Halloween. Every night this month, we've been watching movies. That's a lie. We haven't really every single night because Mercury retrograde destroyed my life for a bit. But we're back and we're doing it again, and every night leading up to Halloween, we're gonna be watching movies, and then on Halloween, we're gonna be watching movies. It's gonna be awesome. You can join, you can come on my Discord, we can chat, we can watch movies together. It's awesome. Please check it out. I would really appreciate it. Even $1 would help, but even if you don't, thank you so much for watching anyway, and I will see you all very soon.
Why on earth would I be carrying around a mouse?